Okay. Down to the wire here. We were fixing some last minute stuff on our end, but I still made it on time. Hope everybody's getting in the chat. Kick off your shoes, make a cup of tea. Let's do this. We're back. We did it again. We pulled it off. I don't know when that feeling will go away, that I'm like, we did it. We made it. Another time, another stream. We are here. And I'm excited to be here with everybody. How's everybody doing? Did you have a good week? I had a good week. You know what I did this week? I did a thing that was feeling like a total novelty 4 months ago. And now after doing it for a few months, it's feeling less like a novelty now. I played a gig again, which like from March until July was like, oh, I guess we'll never do that again. And now it's I guess we'll do that outside and less often, which, you know, we'll take it. I can, if that's all we got, that's all we got. So that was fun and good to go. And also, to astute stream viewers, you might notice something new going on here, which is that my keyboard, which is normally here, is over here. Dun, dun, dun. New changes are afoot. That's because I am making way for this thing that my long overdue haircut is obscuring here. I've got it perfectly set up to block this thing, which is coming. It's going to come over here soon. It's a new rack that I had made by the guys at Audio Racks, and the legs arrived today, and I'm going to set it up, and I'm so excited for the final culmination of Rack Day. But how have you guys been? Have you guys been making music? I hope so. Tell me in the chat what you've been up to. Has anybody released anything since last week, or put out a video, or just made something that they're excited about? I made a little something last night. It's a total throwaway thing, but I made a jingle last night that was kind of fun to do some sample juggling and play around with some jingles. So that was fun. Stefan asks, can you order human legs on the internet? You know what? I bet you can. And how weird is that? There's got to be some dark web place where you can do that. My legs will not be human legs because I don't want to end up on the news. So I'm getting the regular old mid-century modern hairpin legs. Swag Balls, yes, I did. Made some music. Chris Brain made some music. All right, good. Well, guys, that's what we're doing today, too. We're going to make a little music. That's the plan. I guess that's the plan every week, right? But that's really the plan this week because we're going to be getting a little more. I'm going to say we're going to get deep, though I'm trying to be aware of all levels of people that might be watching. So let me I'll clue you in. Our guest this week, Bryn Bliska, she may be kind of a genius, or at least a highly, highly clever musical theory genius. And that's great. So we're gonna tap into her knowledge. At the same time, I'm gonna be somewhat like in a comedy duo. There's like the straight man. I'm gonna be the one trying to pull us and make it accessible for the everyman. So we're gonna be talking about some music, like some music theory. Like we're gonna be talking about jazz chords. We're gonna be talking about natural number, Roman numeral type, both chord intervals and diatonic chords within a scale. We're talking about stuff. It's going to be heavy, but it's going to be useful if you are trying to make cool, vibey music, because that is what her specialty is. So why don't we bring her on? Guys, say hello and welcome Bryn Bliska.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. That was quite an introduction. I'll try to live up to it and keep it down to earth at the same time.
Yeah, you are sort of a balance to that energy. I get the sense you're very sort of not chill, no, but even. You seem to have just kind of this even energy. That's like
I try to keep it reasonable.
I mean, in a lot of ways, the style of music that you make and sort of that you're drawn to is an outcropping of, I guess, your personality in a way, right?
Yeah, totally. I would say I'm a huge nerd, so there's definitely like that nerdy side, but I'm also like a pretty chill person. So I've kind of just embraced the fact that all of my music has that like very smooth feeling to it.
It's a thing that I always have really enjoyed when I play music with others. You know, I play guitar and I'll play in different settings with different people. And there's this truism that people are the type of player they are as a person. So, you know, if I show up somewhere and it's kind of, you know, a jam, like just a throw together little thing. And if someone shows up and they're like, you know, just kind of a shy, reserved person and, you know, a little bit timid, then I know right away that that's what they're going to be bringing to this ensemble, you know. And if someone is like annoyingly boisterous or dominating, you know, conversation, like, okay, well, that's the guy whose solos are going to go on for, you know, 3 minutes or something, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely just another form of communication. So
try
to take it as such.
Well, so you know, I was saying to you just before we went on, I thought maybe before we dive into kind of some of the theory and stuff we wanted to share with people, I thought maybe we get people up to speed kind of on your music and kind of what is, you know,
totally,
because we're going to be working, I think, in a sort of something of a demo today, but maybe we should set people up with less of a demo and more who is Bryn Bliska. So let's see. I'm looking to see. Okay, I have a Spotify link. We're going to just hope for the best here. Oh boy, now I got to figure out how to open in Spotify. Open in desktop app. There we go. Okay, here it comes. So guys, wait, which track are we looking at? Is it?
So this is a song called "Love the World."
Love the World. Okay, cool.
And it's a track by my friend Dap the Contract, who's an amazing independent rapper based here in New York as well, that I produced earlier this year. Cool.
Okay. I'm gonna hit play. I may, if it's, I don't know if it is, but if it's one of these songs that has like a 40-second build or something, I might start skipping ahead. But don't you or Dap the Contract take offense to that.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Check. When I put my hoodie on, I feel like Trayvon. Just hope I make it back to the crib before the day gone. Looking over my shoulder, I see the hate come. Just bend over harms, yeah, this is just another waveform. My girl just started new work, a rack is Xylon. Like modern day slavery, hear sirens, gotta stay calm. You trap a kid, you kill the narrative, I'm trying to save us. Like it was written in the stars, could never change us. The pharmaceuticals killing, that's why we hate farms. They breeding super animals, that's why we hate farms. I gotta talk my shit, they like say some. Side old DAP, I bring it back like Jake from State Farm. See where I'm from, they got respect for me like Nate Dogg. Yeah, wish I could be a clone, I work like 8 jobs. Or maybe one job could change it all. They talking Steve Jobs, that iPhone, close your third eye until you see none. Mother Earth on the last, and niggas don't believe in wildfires or viruses, but we believe in Jesus and we never seen him. They think I'm losing my faith, they lost the meaning. I don't believe in God because of church, I just feel it. I know mama think I'm drinking too much, she hate the
I could listen to this all day.
But the boy grown up, now reaching for the
Thank
stars.
you.
It's time to graduate again, I gotta set the bar.
It's so good. It's so good. That first line when I put my hoodie on, I feel like Trayvon. I was like, whoa, okay, hang on, something's about to be said here, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. This track came together really quickly this spring. He's someone that I work with all the time, you know, doing production and session work. And I had sent this over to him, and you know, it kind of all came pouring out.
That's amazing. It's
unfolding this spring. Yeah.
Looking at the comments, some people are complimenting the swing on that, which is true. It's got, you know, it's got some good
heavy
swing.
In the backbeat. Definitely love. You know, Dilla is obviously a huge inspiration. So
yeah. You know, it's interesting. I interact with, like, sort of what I was saying at the top here. I interact with all manner of users, and one of the things I see early on is people you know, a lot of times when you're getting into music, you know the thing you like, you can hear the thing you like, but you don't know really what's happening. So the classic one for people that are drawn to this sort of style is they actually don't understand about swing or shuffle, you know, either software shuffle or, you know, quantizing to a certain groove shuffle. Like they haven't, like, they just haven't been clued into it yet. And so, you know, a lot of times I'll see people will send in music or something, and I'll see someone, I can kind of tell, oh, they're early on in their learning curve, because they'll have, like, it's kind of a vibe. It's a nice vibe, but it's a very straight vibe. And when you take away the swing from those things, it's like, ooh, you lose.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Yeah, as a young producer, I spent a lot of time just like ripping beats into DAWs and just like manually, kind of tempo mapping them and being like, oh, like where's the snare placed? Where is that relative to the hi-hat and the kick?
That's awesome.
I was just really into like basically transcribing like rhythms of beats that I was like, this is crazy. Because I'm not a drummer, but that's such an important part of what I like about music.
That's such a good tip.
Obviously, there's a lot of software that can do that for you, but I think, if you do it yourself, then when you're actually going to play in a beat, you have like an internal reference of like, oh, like what should this groove maybe be doing? And like, how could I adjust? Or if I just lay down like something that's locked to the grid, how could I adjust it really quickly in a way that I know is going to get me a cool sound that's, unique.
That is a thing that I felt when I came into doing music production and electronic music production and stuff. I came in from the 90s playing guitar and playing in bands. And when you come from a more traditional place, and I think you come from a piano background more traditionally, there is a totally naturally baked in process that I'm going to first learn rudimentary things to learn the mechanics of my instrument. Then I'm going to start to learn the songs I love, and I'm going to literally just imitate the songs I love, badly usually in a basement with a band. But that's what I'm going to do. And then through doing that, I'm going to find my own sound and my own style and things I like. But that doesn't exist as much. What you're talking about doing is actually very rare, that someone would literally, because it's seen as copying or it's too literal, like people don't want to sort of literally drop a song into a DAW and deconstruct it.
Totally. Yeah, it's funny because I think we see like DAW production and music production as like such a creative practice, and I think I and a lot of other people always want to jump to like, let me make something like this is my, opus or whatever, but I think because I come from such an instrumental background and like a jazz training where, as you were saying, so much of it is literally just like chewing on material. That's something that I've like brought to my production journey as well.
Right.
I found that's like,
which is really kind necessary. Of what we're going to be talking a little bit about today with looking at this chord progression is like, we're going to be looking at what is like a super standard chord progression. You don't open up your DAW and decide, today I'm going to innovate a chord progression the world has never heard,
Totally.
It's so baked into those other sort of rudimentary practices to take things and build on them. And it doesn't have to be a reinvention every single time you launch the program.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a question that came in. Are what we just heard, are those samples or you playing?
So great question. So basically what the process with that track was very interesting. So I have, I think I have it here actually. I have this the Teenage Engineering PO33 is a sampler. So I had made like most of the beat, like the drums I programmed on here, and the like flute was a sample that I sort of like chopped and played back on here. So that was like the fundamental kind of sample that I then like resampled via this and, ultimately ended up in my DAW that I was messing around with. And then the rest of the production was really like layering additional percussion, all of the keys, played in, bass, synths, played those in, some guitar that comes in on the bridge. So I pretty much like laid out the whole track, sent it over to Dap. He kind of did his thing, and then we just like massaged the arrangement a bit. Gotcha.
Now, when you sent that over to him, how was it basically as we hear it sort of there and he put on top, or did you have to sort of make space for him and clear things out and edit a bit, or?
Yeah, so he's a producer as well. So I had sent him a version and he kind of cut it up into a slightly altered arrangement. And then I was like, oh, okay, like I see what you did. So I went back into the original stems version and remade that new slightly altered arrangement. And then that was kind of that, yeah. Gotcha.
Cool. Well, it's such a good vibe. And so this is when I was writing the description for this for this stream, I referred to you as a professor of vibe. And I really do think that in all
you're not wrong.
Yeah, I know. You're like you literally do you teach this stuff and you it's so central to what you do. And I thought maybe we could sort of dive in and talk about this stuff, but you have, because you come at it, like we were saying, because you come at it from not a just experiment and see what happens, but rather build on fundamentals kind of mentality, you've sort of kind of come up with certain ways to engineer vibe, I guess. Is that wrong to say?
No, definitely. I think for me, it's sort of, with everyone who's becoming a producer, you work through so much material, you're listening. In my case, I was going through like extensive like piano training, and eventually all of that sort of just like in the washing machine for long enough. And I think you kind of like reject things that you're like, that doesn't feel like super central to my creativity or authentic. And eventually you kind of coalesce these really central themes. So for me, I feel like it's an ongoing process, but I've hit a point where I'm like, oh, okay, like these are sort of the aspects of jazz and R&B and hip hop that really resonate with me, that kind of move forward into my work. And also recently, I would say I've been revisiting like my earliest inspirations, which were much more like pop, rock, kind of like more straight ahead music. So using those two things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in terms of the jazz element of stuff, this is where, I mean, as much as I love the open-ended creativity of sort of modern production, having a jazz fundamental background certainly roots you in I would imagine in some ways it helps shortcut you to certain places you want to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Knowing sort of certain chord progressions and certain tricks, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've kind of also come to is like my identity as a producer, I think is very much rooted in harmony, which is kind of counter to, I don't know, I feel like general music trends. I think I hear a lot of music that's like extremely, rhythmically awesome, melodically amazing, production chops just like wild. And for me, I think kind of having that harmony thread is still a strong kind of core of what I do. I think that's something that makes what I'm doing is slightly unique,
Right.
Or it just makes it, feel like it's a real natural extension of kind of like my whole music upbringing. Right.
I know I read an article recently about sort of modern pop particularly, and they were talking about the 5 chord and how the 5 chord had gone away for like at some point in the last year and a half. It was like the pop world just decided we don't need the 5 anymore. We're just going to take the 5 out. And so for people watching, I'm going to do some of this balance here. We're talking about, in any scale, every chord, you're going to hear us mention chord numbers a lot today. So in any scale, you can number the notes of the scale. And maybe, is there a way, you probably have done this before, is there a way you could explain kind of that, what I call the national numbering system, which maybe the jazz cats don't call it that?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, so exactly, if you identify the root and you call that one, within most traditional diatonic scales, there's basically, 8 notes. And so we're just sort of going up from 1, to 8 being the next octave. The 5 is, I guess mathematically, it's one of the most sort of like consonant intervals. It comes from like a very close frequency relationship between, the two waves. So it sounds very...
So the fifth note of the scale, if you play the chord that relates to that, you're playing the 5 chord, would be the shorthand of saying that. But yeah, so there's a certain sound to it that has a very, it's kind of got a certain resolution, but then pulls you back to the 1 at the same time. But this article was saying that it kind of gone away, and they were interviewing sort of more music listeners and music consumers as to what their feelings were on it. And everyone was like, yeah, it kind of just sounds cheesy. Like that was kind of I was like, no, don't take away the 5 chord.
That's so funny. I like went through a period of time where I wrote like 5 songs and I realized that all the choruses started on the 5 chord. I was like, oh no,
yeah, I
need to pick one of these. But
right.
Yeah, no, I love the 5. My personal flair with the 5 is I like the 5, if you're just playing, I've got a keyboard here, as you guys will see in a second. But like if we're in the key of G, and the 5 is D, I love having the 5, but adding the sus4. So it's literally just keeping the root that you're going to go back to. It kind of softens it and makes it less like slightly less marchy and a little more like poppy.
Yeah. That is
the resolution is like a less of a steep slope.
I want to say, is it Wonderwall? There's like an Oasis song where I saw Noel Gallagher breaking down kind of what it is about that chord progression, and particularly the way that he does it, that has made it like a campfire song for the ages that just everybody plays, or like the embarrassing guy trying to like impress his the girl that's really not into what he's playing right now. But
that's so funny.
That he was saying that he's doing that basic thing of he's sort of keeping the one in every chord, so that it kind of has this drone thing. And I, as a banjo player, love the drone, so I'm like fully on board with any time you can keep that kind of constant tonality. It's neat.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I play the guitar as well, not nearly as well as I play piano, and guitar voicings are much more, and just sort of guitarisms I feel are much more prone to those sort of drone tones, but they translate really well on any instrument. So that's something I'd love to throw in there as well.
Right. Well, so maybe we should dive in because we're going to be talking about, am I correct in saying we're going to be talking about one chord progression this whole time, but we're going to see how deep we can get with it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I would say we're going to work on one. We're going to use like the root as the progression, right? So we're going to do what's called a 1-6-2-5, again, referring back to that numbering system.
Yeah.
And we're going to sort of take that through a variety of iterations and see where we end up.
I love it. And so, and sort of getting vibier and vibier, I guess, as we go. That's a very abstract word to apply to it, but because, vibe is you can vibe out on anything, but cool. Yeah, let's pull up your screen.
Yeah, definitely.
And so while you do that, so just to reiterate for people that are kind of coming into this, 1-6-2-5, we're talking about the chord in a scale, the chord that is the root chord, the 1 of the scale, the chord that is then the 6th interval in the scale, the chord that is then the 2nd interval in the scale, and the chord that is then the 5th interval in the scale. It's a 4 progression chord progression that is incredibly common. I'm going to put you on the spot and myself on the spot here, but is it correct to say that was certainly in the 20th or first half of the 20th century? It's kind of where that thing just was all over the place.
Yeah,
and then
definitely
rock and pop started to move in some other standards, as it were, into chord progressions, and now it sort of lives amongst many.
Totally. I would say the major shift that I would identify is the 1-6-2-5 is super, super heavy in the jazz world. There's like a whole category of songs that are based around that, and it's something you like learn a bunch of if you study jazz. But in the pop realm, it's more often the 1-6-4-5. So we'll look at the 2 and the 4. It's really just a difference of the root, because the upper structure that you'd be playing is often the same.
Right.
But the 4 is the more poppy iteration.
So that 1-6-4-5, even when, oh no, you played the 1-5 before. Never mind. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, well, let's take a look at that. I'll be keeping my eye on the comments here and kind of throwing some stuff out here. I'm noticing, by the way, Jeff Gibbons is in the audience, and Jeff, let's talk. I'd love to have you on as a stream guest. So let's. I think Stefan will.
Shout out, Jeff.
But okay, cool. So maybe I guess you lead me. You tell me kind of how we want to go through this. But maybe we should hear what is a 1-6-2-5. And I should say up front, people that haven't caught on. So Bryn is one of these new modern Reason users who is using Reason as the plugin in Ableton
Please
Live.
Accept me in your community.
I'm so happy to have you. No, I'm so happy to have you. I love this. This is great. Some of the people, a lot of the guests I've had on have been people that I've known and we've known kind of through the company, through our artist relations. And so they come through the DAW as their main tool. But like when I see you, I get super excited as a guy who wants the Reason community to be as huge as possible. I always get really excited when I see someone like you who is Reason has been outside your world because you had a DAW and you weren't keen to necessarily switch just to no matter how compelling the instruments were. It's like, yeah, but all my other stuff's over here. So I just love seeing people like you coming into the Reason community. So welcome.
Glad to be here.
But
I was just going to say, I'll give you guys a cruise through. I just set up like a quick beat here that we could use as a template to explore the 1-6-2-5. So before I play that back, was just going to let everyone know I'm in the key of G here. So within G, if we think of just the G major scale, the G is obviously the root, the 1. E is going to be our 6. 2 is going to be A. And 5 is going to be D. And we're going to start off sort of working within, the G major scenario. We're going to look at kind of pushing and pulling in and outside of that. And then time willing, we will just flip it and work in like a G minor scenario. So here's the beat I've got going. Basically just a drum sample, a nice bass. I believe this was monotone. Excellent. And some friction, adding a little bit of flair. So here's the palette, and you'll hear the bass just outlining the 1-6-2-5. You'll also hear the beat is definitely not quantized. There's a lot of rhythmic pushing and pulling there.
Now, that's an audio loop, that beat? Or is that...
So the drums were a loop that I pulled from Splice Pack from J3PO and the Aux, Lenny, amazing drummer.
Gotcha. And so that in your sense, that pulling is actually it's a feature, not a bug. You actually are drawn to that loop because of that.
Absolutely. Yep, totally. And I really just cut up a little bit to honestly make it more simple because it was pretty wild. It was even wilder to begin with. But yeah, I am always drawn to loops that are super weird.
Gotcha. I'm just seeing a comment here, is lagging a little bit in the timing on the stream here. Curtis Timmons says, "Can I use the Kong drum machine as a plugin in Logic Pro?" You can, Curtis. This is what this is what Bryn and I were talking about. That yes, Reason now runs as a plugin, audio unit plugin in Logic or VST in other or AAX and Pro Tools. But yes, you can and you should. Okay, carry on, Bryn.
Awesome. Yeah, so obviously if we just think about, oh, sorry, my Lord, computer's blown up on me. I think I accidentally just tried to update Reason. So sorry, guys.
Right.
It's really throwing that message in my face and I keep ignoring it, but it's got a mind of its own at this point. Okay, so if we're just keeping things as simple as possible, right? So we've got our G major scale, which, on the keyboard, as you can see, it's all white notes. And then we've got the F sharp. That's the major 7th. Yeah. So if we're going to play the most simple version of this, it's going to be, G major, E minor, A minor, and then D major. So those were all just triads in the root position. I think I've reached a point in music where I actually hate hearing triads played in the root position just in a row.
This is a thing that came up on another stream that a songwriter that we had on, she was saying the same things. Like, for the love of God, don't just play the triad.
It's actually like, I feel like such a snob, but like it sounds like nails on a chalkboard to me at this point. I'm just going to be honest with y'all. So my first sort of like hack, I guess, would just be one of the goals of, creating voicings, especially as a piano player, in a live context or in a producer context, is I'm looking for voice leading. And that essentially means I'm going to take these triads, but I'm going to invert them in ways such that I'm basically moving my hand as little as possible. So we have like a laziness aesthetic and we just run with that. And the result is it creates like a nice, much more flowy progression to be like, okay,
I'm going to break that down for people that are following along a little bit, but maybe on the early learning curve. So first of all, when you say you're playing triads in the root position, we'll just define that real quickly. What we mean is triad. It's you're playing a chord with just 3 notes in it. Those 3 notes are the 1 of the scale or of the chord, the 3rd note interval for the chord, and the 5th note interval for the chord. And when you say the root position, what you're saying is that you're playing the chord with that in that order: 1, 3, 5. You're in your lowest note is your 1, then comes your 3rd note, then your 5th note. And,
exactly.
And so this hack you're talking about is basically you're figuring out how to move. I'm trying to think how to describe it. You're figuring out how to reorder that. So you could go 3-5-1 or 5-3-1 or
yep, exactly.
How so you can reorder? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if we take the G major, G, B, D to E minor, E, G, B transition, we would notice that there's these 2 common tones, G and B.
Yeah.
So I really have the option of starting with my G major chord with the D on top and then flipping to the E minor. This would be the root position with the E on the bottom. Or if I'm being, lazy and hip, I would take the D and just move it up a whole step to the E.
And now you're playing the E minor.
Transition from G major to E minor, exactly.
With the least movement possible. This is a thing. Yeah. Guitarist Stefan, who's manning our chat here, is a shredder guitarist, and they always talk about efficiency of movement and efficiency of motion, right? Of like how to do the least movement and get the most out of it. And this is the piano version of that in a way.
Yeah. And I mean, literally, if you're on a gig and you're trying to comp along, let's say you're playing like a rhythm changes song and it's going at like a bajillion beats per minute. Like you literally can't, you could move that quickly, but it's sometimes not possible and it's way easier to move less. So I do think that there's like a physical constraint involved that we don't sometimes run up in like the studio, but the reason some of this music sounds this way is literally because of the physics of playing.
Right. But there also is, to some degree, you know, you're saying that you may be worried that it sounds a bit snobbish to say that it's like nails on a chalkboard to just hear root position triads. But I will say this. I think that culturally, in our DNA at this point, there's a little bit of that we have heard that for, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number and say 150 years of what we might consider popular music. We have heard that for so long that there is an almost cheesiness to it.
I agree with that, yeah.
The minute we can depart from that in any way, just through that, I mean, it's a single inversion trick. The minute we can do that, we end up just already stepping outside of what you might find on like a Casio keyboard demo or something, you know?
Yep, totally. So obviously to talk about the inversions a bit more as well, like we have still been starting, you know, with G in the root position. So here's me moving to E minor. I just moved the E. Now I would notice E is the common tone for my next chord, A minor. So I'm going to actually revisit the root position, but I just moved each of those two lower voicings up one step.
Okay, so this
that's
is
a nice voice leading.
So I'm the kind of person, because I do a lot of sort of tutorial writing and technical writing, I start writing the rules in my head while it's going. And what I'm realizing is that prime directive number one was, you know, it's not correct, but it's sort of, it would seem at first, prime directive number one is avoid root chords at all costs, root triads at all costs. But actually it's superseded by prime directive number two, which is efficiency of motion. So you made the choice that you wanted to go. Yeah, it's like you're going to that A minor.
Totally.
But it's okay now because it's efficient.
In the context, it feels like the right move to me. And then from there, you know, we could keep the A as our common tone, move up to D major by just elevating those top two voicings.
Right.
However, we could start this whole thing over, right? So we've been beginning on the G root position, but we could start this in the first inversion, do the same thing. And so we're going to have different ones of the chords are going to land on the root inversion versus other inversions. You know, so obviously for a triad, there's basically 3 different inversions that you could use.
I see.
That one I actually probably wouldn't do. I would do that, even though it's slightly less efficient.
I think something about that particular set of inversions is I'm singing the na 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 sweet land of liberty of the. I said one of our little you know. One of those indoctrinating childhood patriotic songs they teach us.
Totally. It's funny when I teach, you know, piano or music theory, I try to get people to think of songs that have, you know, the common intervals in them. So you can be like, weirdly, the one that I remember for like, you know, a perfect fifth and a minor sixth is like Yeah by Usher. But if you associate it with that song, like you will never forget what those intervals sound like.
That's great. Yeah. That is so great. Yeah, wow.
It becomes harder for some of the more distant intervals, but you can find songs that you know and love.
I'm going to hold on to that one. That was a good one. Yeah, I was just doing this last week because I did a solo stream where I was talking about finding vocal harmony and doing some ear training and stuff. And I was trying to help people. And I sort of have certain mnemonic devices like that for like, the examples I was using was, well, the Three Stooges for hello, hello, hello. Nice. Everybody loves a good 1930s reference. But the Beatles, the stacking the ahs on Twist and Shout. And then I got into this thing where I realized when you're trying to find the harmony note below a vocal harmony, a doorbell interval is just like the most perfect way to keep finding that note.
Oh, nice. That's a great one.
I know, but I was on a stream for 3 hours and I about 800 times are going, okay, so now our note's this, so now bing bong, bing bong. Just kept like, it got a bit crazy. But that Usher one's a good one. So, what I'm realizing though that we sort of went through there was that the starting inversion of for your first chord determines the inversions of all the other chords, right?
Yep.
So
exactly.
In that first example, you started with a traditional G major triad, and then in order to be efficient, you were kind of just moving as little as possible.
Exactly.
But you could choose to start with a different G major inversion, and then that will redefine everything.
Totally. And, obviously within a longer progression, you could restart at any given point. This is a pretty, short progression of 4 chords. So I would sort of opt for probably going with the flow of wherever you start in the context of this position, but either over the course of the tune or, if it was a longer progression, obviously like stopping and restarting is a way to create sort of dynamics within the piece. You wouldn't have to just like keep writing it forever, although you could do that and it would be kind of interesting, right? You just keep going like forever to wherever it ends up.
Well, it's funny. I mean, you just do that. First of all, kudos to you on your ability to be thinking of those inversions while talking and doing both completely
naturally. There's honestly
naturally.
no thoughts anymore. It's
oh, that's so wild. You're just like, yeah. So anyway, blah 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 blah. But well, actually, what you're to remove this from sort of the neo soul kind of jazzy, stuff. That is a thing that's done all the time in EDM to create builds where you'll have a chord progression and you'll start in one inversion and then you move through the inversion so that you're literally moving up, and that's just creating those these rises that are so fundamental to that genre. It's an inversion. You're actually tricking the brain into getting excited because the brain's just going, it's getting higher in pitch. I mean, whatever causes an audience to freak out about that. So that's interesting to see that the same would apply, in other genres for sure. Well, okay, so now where does one go with this? Because so far we've got what is the song? I keep singing "Sweet Land of Liberty." I sing, and my father died.
I know what it is, but I don't.
I can't think of what the name of the song. Any Americans watching? What is this song?
It sounds very patriotic.
Yeah, I know it's so. But anyway, right now we still have a song that sort of sounds like that. But how? Maybe do those chords? If we played those chords over your beat, does that already kind of?
No, let's do that just to kind of put it in context. So we're still sticking with the triads,
Now, out of curiosity, could you do it as root chord triads?
Definitely. Here would be that. Sorry, everyone. There's that super square version as well.
Do you need to go detox now for a second to sort of...
No, it's all good. I can hang.
Okay, cool. But so, I mean, it's still there, even in the inversion hacked version, there is something of a tonal contrast going on between the sort of swung and the bass line and that sort of thing, and then these sort of very major chords.
Totally. Yeah, it doesn't quite fit. There's definitely room for like triad based play, I would say, in neo soul. And what's interesting to me is like something that you'll hear kind of gets back to the idea of like a drone note or a common tone is something that's really common would be if you're in, the key of G major, creating melodies that just involve G major and A minor. That's something that like, D'Angelo does a lot of, someone that I absolutely revere. So you can build up, slightly more neo soul focused lingo, just keeping things in close triad voicings. I'm just going to play that because I think that's something that people overlook, but it's really a quick way to sort of get something going that sounds relevant. Here we go. So I cheated a little bit there. But for the most part,
it didn't sound like you were
exactly.
cheating. It sounded like you were working your ass off. Because when I do that, I do that with, yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, pulling from the gospel background, just keeping it within those two chords, you can create a lot of cool melodies.
Really, really neat.
Adding some rhythmic variation, yeah.
I have to, just for the audience and my own shame, I have to point out, somebody said, first of all, the American song that I'm singing is America the Beautiful. Thank you to the comment section.
Jesus.
But
the fact that we didn't know.
No, but it's even worse because somebody from the UK pointed out it's God Save the Queen, the UK national anthem, which makes it even worse that not only could I not remember it, but worse that I then ascribed it to some bastardized American co-opting of their national anthem. I can't believe it.
We're fulfilling all the stereotypes.
To my UK friends, I am sorry. So, okay, cool. But so that's a really neat, that's something I haven't seen before either. I mean, as soon as you do it, it's like, oh yeah, gospel. Yeah. Okay.
Totally. Yeah. It's a fun way to sort of mess around with a limited harmonic vocabulary, but create something that sounds, pretty dope.
That's a good
So I guess we'll live outside of triad land for a little bit.
Okay.
So within, harmony, if we're creating chord voicings, we tend to just sort of like stack ourselves upward in thirds. So the next type of voicing that we often deal with would be the seventh, right? So if we're still in this G major world here, we're going to keep our G major triad. We're going to add the major seventh.
So 1, 3, 5, and 7.
Exactly. It's a major third above, our fifth. And then to return to our root positions, if we're in E minor, we've got our E minor 7. That's going to be the dominant 7. So it's a whole step below the root. We're going to transpose that just to the 2, get the 2 minor 7. And then our 5, this is a voicing that's kind of hard to hear on its own, in my opinion. This is a straight up, dominant 7th.
Yes.
Maybe that's why people left it in the dust for a while.
Yeah, that's the one that I think people feel it sounds like, oh, it's pretty goodbye, aggressive. My Coney Island baby. It's like got that cheesiness to it. It sort of instantly sounds barbershop.
It's hard because, you're dealing with 2 really strong intervals. The 5th obviously is like a huge backbone, and then the tritone is defining the dominant chord. And something about putting them together, it's very, it feels like a classical resolution, right?
Yeah.
I think it's used beautifully in a lot of contexts, but for some reason it can feel super lame as well. So we can apply that same logic of trying to keep our voicings a little bit tighter to these 7th chords. So if we've got our G major 7, we could flip to the E minor 7 by just moving my F sharp to my E. So I've actually got 3 common tones that I'm holding on to, just moving the E. And then for the A minor 7, a couple of options. We have these 2 voicings are in the A minor 7. This is our 5th and our dominant 7th. So we can take our 5th and dominant 7th from the E minor, each move those down, and we've ended up at A minor 7. And then to get to D, we've got A and C as common tones. We can throw in the root and the third. So together that would sound like... It's starting to sound very 50s, which is kind of cool. It's a vibe, but it's getting us somewhere that's a little more harmonically rich than just the original triads. So we're taking baby steps.
And so, but this is still, am I correct if I'm following correctly? You're not doing anything other than just bringing in the 7th.
Yep.
And then fitting it into a tight inversion.
Tight shape, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that would bring me to kind of a next layer of things we could do. This is related to the idea of inversions, right? But in, piano language, we talk a lot about drop 2 voicings. So what that means is if I have a voicing in sort of a close type of arrangement, what I can do is take the second highest voicing, or note within the voicing, I should say, and we're going to actually drop it down an octave. So I'm taking the D from this register, and I'm going to play it down here instead. And so now we have something that I would say is like objectively hip. Like we've taken a really straight ahead voicing and we've made it cool. Like we've officially landed in a world where I'd be like, I would play this at a gig and not just get cut, right?
This drop 2 thing is something that came up on a previous stream. We had a game composer on, happened to be my brother,
Awesome.
but game composer.
Nice.
And he was talking about the same idea. Now, in his world, he very often, when he needs to create a score that has sort of these like tension cues, that like he needs something to kind of feel tense and weird, he works off these clusters. So he'll take a very dissonant cluster, and then he uses drop 2 and drop 4 to kind of expand the cluster so it feels less like a tense, like a tight dissonant thing. But just by doing that, you can almost sort of take something that shouldn't work on paper, and it works by doing that drop 2 thing. But
I think the most like concrete example of that is if you just think of the difference between a minor second, which is a semitone essentially, and if we basically apply that drop logic, I've created a major seventh, right? So there is a logic to spreading out those voicings.
Oh, interesting.
That's just going to create a different mood, right? And sometimes you want this sound. Like I'm all about crunchy dissonant stuff when it's appropriate, when you want that, but other times you're like, I need it to be more open.
That is so interesting. Can you just go back and forth between those? It's so neat how one feels. Yeah, it's like one of them feels just so. It's like you said. I mean, it's crunchy and it can be the right choice, certainly.
Totally. I mean, literally, those frequencies are they're really close together, so they're sort of creating like a lot of. I don't know if like when you're tuning a guitar, you create like a beat frequency when you get really close.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of sort of competition.
Like harmonic
the waveforms
tremolo
don't line up exactly. So it does, for whatever reason, perceptually kind of keep us on edge. In a way that's interesting.
Right. So now let's take a look. So go back to your example to maybe just kind of do this drop 2 so play the first version.
Yeah. So here's our G major 7 root position.
And you're taking the B note. Oh no,
I'm taking the D second from the top. Yeah. You could do either one. So here's me dropping the D down. And I think the reason that the drop 2 evolved to be the most popular is because, well, I'm literally making stuff up, but how I see it is the D, if you invert the D down, you are starting from, kind of the upper part of your voicing. So you're creating space, but you're not creating a crazy amount of space. If, on the other hand, I took the B out and dropped it down, it's going to be a bigger voicing, right? So it's even more open, and it also sounds amazing. It's just a little bit more in the open direction as well.
This is a thing that came up last week on the harmony discussion, that when you're working on vocal harmonies, as you move further away, you get less. It can sound nice to open it up, but you lose some of that sympathetic resonance of close tones that kind of, as you move away, it's like you lose the cohesiveness of the chord.
Yeah, I think it's, for some reason it's harder to, maybe it's like perceptually we can't categorize what's going on as easily. Like you hear this, and even my brain, I think because the B is really sticking out more as like a root type voicing. If I just heard this played, I actually wouldn't even think of it as a G major 7 probably. I'd be like, oh, it's, some sort of open B minor voicing or something else. It would be like way less specified in my brain. Versus this is still kind of like idiomatically, but also because of where it came from, it still feels very much like a G major 7.
Now, can I ask the dumb question on behalf of other people that might be wondering it?
There's no dumb questions.
So we're calling this drop 2, but you're dropping
It's the second from the top.
You count it as the second from the top.
Yeah, that's how I learned. That could be like a completely wrong way of doing it. I don't know.
Interesting. I'll have to go back and look. I wonder if Jesse.
I don't know if that's wrong or right. I'm sorry, world, if I go astray. But
it's whatever we say it is today. This is the Bryn Bliska school of drop 2. But okay, so it's the second from the top, and that would be if you were playing a different, not a root chord position.
Totally.
It would still.
So same
would apply?
Same logic would apply. If we take so this is the first inversion of the G major 7, right? Now my second highest voicing is this F sharp. I'm gonna drop it down. That one's pretty dissonant, right? Because I've created this, I guess, minor ninth in a sense. It's like a one above an octave.
Yeah.
So that's not a super popular voicing. But it's kind of cool. It would live in certain worlds, right? If we take our second inversion, then we actually end up with what I would say is a pretty common voicing.
Okay.
Kind of like an upper structure, right? Because I have now the root of the chord has ended up back on the bottom, but the remaining 3 notes that are sort of defining the harmony of my chord are like more spread out than they would have been if I was just in the root position.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Okay. So I'm glad I cleared that up. Second from the top.
Or made it more confusing. I don't know. Sorry, everyone. But the idea of drop voicings is just take a voicing that you're playing and just move anything around to anywhere and see how it sounds, you know?
Gotcha.
I go with the ear-based approach for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, so if we walk through, I guess, just drop two of sort of our original sevenths progression now. So we have our G major 7, E minor 7, A minor 7, D7.
Yeah.
So I guess the drop two version would be something like this, keeping that. And then we're going to end up in that, which I love. So I've got my A minor 7, but it's sounding very much like a C major 7. That's a beautiful voicing because it's got two perfect fifths stacked. It's pretty cool. And then lastly, we end up with a pretty straight ahead seventh voicing.
Right.
The seventh is always it's funny because when I play music, sevenths are kind of in jazz, especially, like they're an opportunity to like really go off the beaten path. And because you're like, I know I'm just about to end up at the root, so I can really like go wild and land somewhere. So often sevenths are where you'll go a bit crazy before landing back in the familiar territory.
Right.
I think that's really ingrained in me now. Like even playing this is hard.
Right. It's funny. Somebody made a comment here. Matt Aguila in the comments. He said, "Part of me wants to sample these chords off the stream and make a lo-fi beat." And I hadn't even thought of that.
For it.
Yeah, totally. Matt,
Absolutely.
if you do, tweet it to us and we'll play it next stream or something. But
that Zoom audio.
Yeah, that's that new Zoom. It's the
2020 sound.
Oh my God, totally. Sheesh. Well, so should we hear how that fits in with your backing?
Yeah, totally. So we'll play some seventh voicings with a bit of drop two action. Sorry if I bastardize it slightly, but I'll try. So that's that general kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's already starting to get somewhere that's a little more jazzy. And obviously most of the time when I'm practicing material, I like to be super rigorous about it. And I'll be like, I'm going to take all of my starting positions, do my drop twos from there. But then, obviously when you're composing or playing, I think mixing and matching and just sort of following what sounds good is great. So I'm really about like pushing yourself kind of like intellectually and analytically to expand your vocabulary, but then abandoning that and just being like, now that I've tried, I'm going to go with what works for me.
That is sometimes the hardest thing to do, is to, sometimes you think learning the rules or learning the fundamentals is tough, but then it's like when to depart from them and know it's okay,
Totally.
This is a thing I work on in my own playing, particularly in my I switch hats and I have my feet firmly rooted in sort of traditional roots music, and I play banjo and stuff. And when I do that, I often have this thing where I'll talk to, I have a teacher that I talk with, we work out arrangements and stuff and do lessons in that way. And I always ask him, can I do this? Or is like the Banjo Council of America going to revoke my membership card? It's like those moments where you're like, no, once you know what you're doing and why, like, yeah, break it. If it works, it works, but rather than just kind of going out in the dark and just like, cause you could, I don't play piano well at all. And my music theory is so. So I could sit down at a piano, I could work out cool vibey chord progressions, but I'm just kind of, stabbing in the dark at, until I go, oh, that's neat. But being able to actually, come at it from more of a methodical approach, I think is super useful.
Yeah, that's something that I feel is very, I don't know. I'm obviously a nerd in many ways. And I feel that like, obviously knowledge is power. And I think having these very structured approaches can be empowering, because then you're like, oh, like I've tried all these different voicings and now I hear that's what they did in this track. You kind of start to put the pieces together in your more either like art consumption or art creation context, and it really comes together in a way, but you've kind of helped yourself maybe get there a bit faster than if you were just like, I'm trying here, but I don't really have any kind of like structure to push my ears in my hands or whatever in any kind of direction.
Right. Cool. So, and I do like that idea that it's not an all or nothing thing. You don't have to say, okay, I've decided to do drop two with minor seven. So that's now every chord is going to be that. And I'm locked into that sort of system, we can pick and choose. Right. Let me just take a quick check-in with the chat. Tonic Mint says, I'm just collecting ideas. That's the idea, Tonic. I hope that you...
Great. We love.
I hope you apply these ideas and stuff. Absolutely. David asks, there's a banjo association in America? Well, there is. They're buried deep in a mountain. You need special clearances to get there. It's a big thing. Someone brings up, Brelian says you need relative pitch. I think maybe that is something we're overlooking to some degree. That's
a great point. Yeah. I think that's sort of one of the first things that I would recommend. And this is actually how I start teaching anyone music, is the idea of, kind of like with the Usher Yacht, understanding intervals. All chords, are basically combinations of notes, and we can think of those combinations as some kind of like mathematical relationship, which I think is good to understand theoretically, hear it, reproduce it, sing it, play it. So yeah, relative pitch, super, super fundamental skill. I'm big on ear training.
Yeah. Someone, Karma says it's a fast lo-fi course here. That is kind of, it's funny that this is referred to as lo-fi, because right now there's nothing actually lo-fi about what the sounds or the theory or any of that kind of stuff, and yet it sort of harkens to a certain, I don't know. I guess it's because when a lot of this style kind of had its second wave of popularity, it was from crate digging, and so it was
totally
lo-fi.
Yeah, a full disclosure. Also, I do have some RC20 on my master bus.
Oh yeah.
So we are getting a limited frequency spectrum with a little bit of some digital lo-fi in there. Gotcha.
Okay, so you do apply some sort of like an overall.
Yeah, I can
vibe.
just for grins here. So here's this very basically modified preset I have. Actually, the EQ that I applied here is very minor. So this is the track without any RC20 on it. The RC20 that I've used here is pretty subtle. There's slight noise, very, very limited EQ, sort of bandpass idea, and then just kind of light distortion and wobble. The way I hear it the most is the upper frequencies of the drums being tamped down a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting that you that your approach there is to apply that to sort of work off the master bus in that way, rather than, because like you're saying, you hear it mostly on the drums. The instinct might be to just apply it to the drums then, but you're going higher level.
If I was truly mastering, I probably wouldn't. I don't know that I wouldn't throw this exact iteration of RC20 on the bus, but it is kind of a way to create. I also make a lot of samples. I have a sample label, and I think often what people are looking for in a sample is some kind of vibe, and applying any kind of bus processing to the whole thing is going to give it that feeling like it was lifted off of a record or a tape, etc.
Right.
This is one of the arguments for master, drastic master processing.
Right. This is a thing that came up. I did an interview with Key Wayne, who has done a bajillion records with Big Sean and Ariana Grande, Beyonce, a bunch of people. But so we have a device in the Reason Rack which you may be becoming familiar with, called the Audiomatic Retro Transformer, which is it's kind of, when we released it, the sort of easy metaphor to explain to people was it was kind of like Instagram for sound, where it's doing a lot of different things to kind of create a filter, a retro filter. And you don't necessarily need to interact in the same way with Instagram, where you choose Mayfair. You don't need to actually do all of the things. You would choose one of these presets and you just get a vibe. And Key Wayne, when that thing came out, he was like, I'm putting that on everything now, because it just gives instantly. I take some chords, could just be a grand piano, and you throw that on, and suddenly you've created something that sounds like, oh, where'd you find that? What do you pull that off of?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think it's a really natural development from, digital audio technology, because we sort of see the precision and our abilities to manipulate sound extremely precisely are just like, continue to being pushed. Isotope does a lot of that amazing stuff. But then on the other hand, I think people are really hungry for way more intuitive black box kind of interfaces, where you're actually having to listen, and kind of not know what's going on until you can identify with your ear.
Right.
So I think that's going to continue to happen. It's sort of like as we push in the super hi-fi direction, we're also kind of like, it's not backlash, but it's like a balancing force.
Sure.
It's kind of keeping us centered in a way that we're not just like doing a bunch of crazy super,
absolutely
precise stuff.
There's a story. I did an interview with Hank Shockley from the Bomb Squad that did all the early Public Enemy and stuff like that.
Awesome.
And he told this story that I just love because so Hank has all these stories where like he single-handedly like shaped hip hop in these wild ways. Like he's got a story about how he basically pulled the tempo from 120 down to 90, which is like now we all think of 90. Like, of course it's 90, but like he had a huge fight in a studio with a producer, but you can't do it that slow. And he insisted, and the guy walked off the project. He's got all these neat stories like that. But one of them
that's amazing.
Is how he created what we now take for granted as the sound of lo-fi filtered drums. And it came from a mistake where he was in the studio and they had, I think an SP12 or 1200 in the studio. They were working on a drum loop sample and something went wrong and it just sounded muffled and messed up and he was freaking out. And he started trying to figure out what's going wrong, and they were checking things in the studio, repatching and trying to figure out, what's wrong on the machine itself. And they finally figured out it was a loose cable, and they got the cable plugged back in and the sound came back and it was full spectrum and sounded great. But all of a sudden he was like, wait a second, pull that cable out a little bit again.
I missed that, yeah.
And then he listened and he's like, okay, now put it back in. Okay, now pull it out. Okay, now put it back in. And then he was like, wait, okay, hang on. We're going to lay down a track of the lo-fi one and then the full hi-fi one. And, it's like those mistake moments that can really,
Totally. I think making mistakes is still one of the ways that I create some of the things that I find the most interesting, which I find extremely humbling as a musician, because you're dedicating yourself to this craft, and yet a lot of the things that you end up liking the best feel pretty much random. But that's something that I really love. It keeps you, I think it keeps you on your toes.
Right.
It keeps me on my toes.
Certainly. Well, so now where does one go from here? What is our path ahead? So
I guess here is where we sort of get into a little bit of wild or uncharted territory. The next kind of step up, if we were to take, so we've been building from our triad to our seventh voicing, the next sort of step up that we would take would be to add the ninth. So the ninth, again, is going to be a third above the seventh. It's also a step above the root. And ninth voicings are pretty beautiful. Often what you'll hear, rather than someone playing the full, basically 5-note voicing, is people will just drop the root out, right? Because that's sort of being taken care of probably by the bass instrument or some other contributor in your mix. So if we just think about taking ninth voicings through this little walk here, we've got G major 9, we've got E minor 9, and you'll notice in the E minor 9, if I drop out the root, it actually is just a G major 7, root position 7th. So fun tip, you could also just fully play your G major 7 for the first 2 chords and it would sound great. Works, with both roots. So we've got our G major 9, our E minor 9. Now we're gonna have our A minor 9.
Could I request? Not that I want to deprecate our lovely Reason plugin, but could you drag that down a little bit so we can see the?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
I've been blocking everything. So we've got G major 9, E minor 9, A minor 9, and D 7 add 9.
That's pretty.
Yeah, and I think, at least for my ear, as soon as I lose the roots in those chords, then I'm starting to hear something that's, again, the 5 really it's troubling for me. It's hard to hear that one. I don't know why. Yeah. I think I need to compose with more 5s and work through that. But anyway, so if we take our ninth voicings, we're losing the root, then we can apply some of that keeping things close logic as well, right? So I've got my G major 9, I've lost the root. I'm going to flip to my E minor 9. Something like that would be kind of cool. We've got this guy on top. My A minor 9, I could go here. Again, keeping a nice minor second in there, some crunchiness. And my D 9 dominant.
So two of those chords have that minor second, that semitone dissonant interval.
Yeah.
It's wild. I mean, it's like, as a guitarist, you know, we do such spread out voicings that it's sometimes wild to me just how much you can get away with that on piano.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think combining those with also open type of intervals is really nice. This is not exactly in the context of the song. I'm trying to think of how it would fit, but let's say we're on the E. If we're in, you know, E minor 9 here, a really common sort of minor type voicing would be that sort of situation, which is basically I've got, you know, an E minor triad super spread out, and I'm adding in the flat 6th. But that's sort of the best of both to me, because it's like I've got so much openness. I've got these 2 really strong intervals, but I also have this really dissonant kind of crunchy guy in the middle. So that's a fun way to just build voicings if you're like outside the context of theory and you're like, I'm just gonna stack 2 things. You know, I've got a perfect fourth, another perfect fourth, a semitone away. That one's quite dissonant. That could work, you know, maybe as an E7 super alt kind of situation. You know,
E7 super alt. I just love the phrase.
Yeah, like any kind of intervals that you're stacking, you're kind of combining like a bit of logic and a bit of randomness. So here's like 2 major thirds stacked, you know, a minor second away. That's actually a really nice E major 7 voicing. Or you could play an F in the root and you get like a minor 7, add major 7, flat 5. You know, so I'm all about like taking stuff and putting it way out of context.
This is why I said up top, I think Bryn might be a genius, because at this point I'm just going, oh, well,
I've just spent like far too much time just like pretty much banging on keys with some semblance of, you know, structure.
That is so cool though. I mean, I hope I've had, and I hope other people are having a similar thing where sometimes you'll just hit chords, and I can't. The first one you just did in this example you're talking about, you just play this chord, and no, the one right before that. What's the one down from that?
Oh Lord.
Oh boy.
Oh, God. I've played too many
Don't
things.
worry about
this
it.
Actually,
that one
this
too,
happens.
though.
Whenever I'm writing, I record everything, because sometimes I'll be working with another person. They'll be like, I love that voicing you played. And it was 12 voicings back.
Right.
I didn't know what it was. So I record everything.
What I'm hoping some people might do, that even if they're only barely following along like I am, they're actually able. I mean, it's great that you put the keys up on screen there. The people can literally just, you know, to get started, they can paint by number and just follow along with the voicings you're choosing.
Taking like 2 different intervals, throwing them down some amount away from each other. I think that's a cool place to start. And then adding, you know, some kind of root and just seeing what happens.
Now there's a question.
I definitely do sort of a lot of that kind of exploration where it's very, it's kind of math based, but it's guided by the ear, right? So you're like, oh, I've got, you know, a bunch of fourths here. That sounds pretty like that's a nice sound. What if I I don't like an A underneath that, but if I have an A flat, that's a voicing, right? So you kind of go through and you're like, that works great too. I love it with a G underneath.
Wow.
So just
God, those big ones. Oh, suddenly it sounds like a Jill Scott record.
Love Jill Scott.
I know. Doesn't it just? Can you just? I just like as soon as you hit that chord, it's like, oh, okay.
Totally. And so I think that's a nice way to sort of take a more creative approach to voicings where you may not know what you're doing, but you can be like, that sounds great. You know, so I think there's a both and here. I'm all about kind of taking both roads and just
a both and
running as fast as possible.
I love it. So Joseph Keenan had a question. I'll read his.
Hey, Jason.
Oh, do you know Joseph?
Mine.
Oh,
yes.
cool.
The musician.
So he's got a great question that relates to voice leading, and what he says is, I feel like lo-fi neo soul uses a lot of planing. Does he mean planing or planning? Planing. Does he mean? Is that a term that means something to you? Okay.
It doesn't mean anything to me.
Joseph, let us know if you meant planning. I'm going to say the word planning because unless Bryn was like, oh yeah, planing, very technical. I know that. So what he says though, he says, I feel self-conscious when I write without good voice leading, in quotes, he puts it. Does Bryn have any thoughts on that?
I definitely do. So, and I'm sort of thinking to myself, like, do I need to know what planing is? Please let me know in the comments.
Let us know, Joseph.
But Ari, like, just regarding knowing what you're doing when you're going to write, I actually would say I really follow my ear. This gets kind of to a larger question of like, what does it mean to develop your craft as a producer? But I actually really do kind of try to dedicate time to just exploring things without the impetus of being like, I'm going to create something, right? So I'll go in and I'll be like, this is a shedding session. You know, I'm learning skills. I may come out of this with something that I want to use, and I may come out of it having basically just like worked out. So I'm all about like, you know, practicing your creative process in various ways without sort of like a goal oriented thing other than just like doing it. But in terms of writing, I find going in a direction that inspires you is the most important thing, right? So sometimes you don't have, you know, we're not all out here being like, I have amazing ideas all the time. So sometimes you start with something that's familiar to you, or you're like, I've heard this kind of progression. I'm going to work with that and then sort of mold it in some other way. I think it's really just about what sounds good to you. I hear a lot of records that, you know, they use correct harmony, but they're not compelling. I hear records that the harmony is crazy and I have no idea what's going on, but I love it. Right. So I think whatever feels right to you is good. And just to sort of take some of the pressure off and be like, some days I'm going to stick with something more traditional. Like even the song that you played at the beginning that I produced with DAP, most of those chord changes are pretty simple. There's a few things in there that give it like a little push, right? So I do some kind of approaches. There's a lot of like, I think it's an E minor so it's basically like a minor 1 to a minor 4. But then I'll throw in like a chromatic approach, stuff like that. So
you may actually be what you may have just done is I think you're tapping into planing.
Am I planing? What the heck, y'all?
So let me tell you what the comments are saying about planing.
This is great. I'm learning so much. Thank you guys.
Joseph says, planing is in moving block chords up and down.
Oh, sick. Okay.
And then someone else later down said, chordal planing equals parallel harmony.
Okay, cool.
Do these mean things to you?
They do mean things to me. So there's a few things going on there in terms of parallel chord voicings. So I think this is a great way to start making progressions. And I would say it definitely comes from sampling as well, right? Because let's say I have a sample that's doing something like this. If I move that, you know, in some kind of interval, I'm going to create something that's weird, but kind of logical, right? So this is basically minor 1 to minor 4. And then I'm moving that whole progression up. You know, in this case, I moved it up a half step. So with that in mind, I think planing is kind of what I was referring to, or I would relate planing to this idea of taking something that you're familiar with and then using like sort of a weird interval-based approach to move it around and see what works. If this is what planing is, my interpretation, a really cool kind of type of progression that I'll hear a lot is like moving some kind of minor 9 voicing in minor thirds. So it's something that sounds super out, but it actually comes from a pretty simple basis. If you start to move those voicings closer together too, you're going to get something that's like even more
right,
like sneakily weird.
Gotcha. It's I'm if people are hearing a doorbell ringing behind me, this is my the legs for this rack are being delivered right now, and I'm gonna let them come back tomorrow. We're not stopping through. There it goes again.
This is
the Fenix guy outside going, answer your door. Oh boy. Sorry guys. So what I love about this though, Bryn, is that when you're doing all this stuff, like look how far we've come in such a short time that, you know, we're applying. I mean, what have we, if we kind of boil it down, we've kind of applied, I don't know, 4 different kind of hack ideas. And now you've got like that, just when you're kind of vamping around on those chords, it's like, ooh, like you throw a loop under that, you got a record.
Totally.
You know, that is really cool.
Say, back on the planing thing too, that to me gets into, I don't know, there's a lot of like classic records that involve that kind of stuff like modal music, right? So if you think of like So What, that's basically, you know, one voicing moved in a whole step. And you could take that through a whole scale. So
no, wait,
we're getting a bit crazy there, but if you take a voicing and sort of move it through either a scale or a series of intervals, that's another cool way to start.
Are you doing, is that what they're referred to as parallel chords, where you're literally just transposing the notes
Yeah, exactly. So here
you're keeping the same exact
sort of
distance is the same, right?
Yeah, this is like an open G voicing. So I've got basically, it's kind of like a G minor 11, G minor third, fifth, minor seventh, 11. So here we are. And you could play, so let's say I'm in kind of like a G minor world. I could actually take this voicing and play it through that entire scale. So the root note, the bottom note, is playing the scale, and everything else is just moving literally like parallel above that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I guess planing does seem to be a big feature of lo-fi music. Now that I'm hearing it and putting the name to the phenomenon.
Interesting. Yeah, we learned a new word.
Totally. And I think that's a great way to start, because then you're taking, maybe you discover one really cool voicing and you want to like work with that. It's a great way to practice it, compose with it. And then contrast that with something that's way more sort of tight harmony with a lot of like traditional voice leading. You could get something that's a mix of those two things as well.
Right. Very cool. Well, now from here, I'm going to, you tell me, do we have vibier and vibier places to go with this, or have we overloaded and saturated everybody's brain with as much vibe as they can handle?
I feel like we've probably overloaded people, but I guess I would say between the world of, we kind of left off with the ninth chord, and then we threw to basically like go nuts, / planing.
Yeah.
What I would say in kind of the mid range would be, you can just keep extending that logic. Not forever, but you could basically get up to the state where you've reproduced like the root note. So now I have, I chose to use what would be really the flat 5 or the sharp 11 in the G major context. That's really all to say, like, in the world of voicings, kind of the next steps beyond a ninth would be taking some of these voicings and altering them, right? So maybe I have my G major 7, my E minor 9, my A minor 7, and then I get to my D7, which has been the sticking point this whole time. And this voicing would be, we would call it the 13, I guess because of the stacking process, but it's really like the 6 of the chord. So here I've got my D7, I've got the 9 in there, and then I'm throwing the 13 on top, which is the 6th also. That's a voicing that I can get down with and I would play all the time, right? So that's a jazzier 5/1 resolution. But then you're like, maybe I want to flat that 13 and the 9, right? So then we get into basically moving individual notes within your voicing, maybe a whole step or a half step to create something crazy. Like this one is a G major 7 with a sharp 5.
Okay.
One of my favorite voicings of all time. So taking some of those familiar chords.
Wait, no, you say your favorite voicing of all time?
Is one of them. I can't go on the record, but so this is G major 9, and I'm taking the 5 and I'm augmenting it, right? I'm raising it up a half step to create this guy, which has sort of a beautiful balance of feeling very resolved and feeling very unresolved. That's sort of like the emotion that I would put behind that chord.
Got you. It's worth mentioning when we're talking about planning for people that are getting into this and kind of wanting to maybe they don't have Bryn's like razor sharp theory wit to figure this stuff out on the fly. People that want to drop a scales and chords player above an instrument in Reason. I'm going to talk Reason for a second here, Bryn.
Totally.
You drop a scales and chords player above, and you can, if you want to do it just in sort of automatic mode, as it were, you turn on chords mode, chuck your number of notes from its default to 3, plays triads, move it to 4, it's going to add that 7th for you, and as you move through the scale, it will do that planing thing, the thing that you're watching Bryn do. Now, it won't be switching inversions and doing all the efficiency of motion stuff, but you'll get the sound, and in fact, if you wanted to, you can write a progression or sort of come up with a sequence you like, and then print it to the sequencer, and you can play with inversions after the fact as well. So scales and chords becomes yet again a really great entry point into some of this stuff as well. So just a tip out there for people that want to do this kind of the technological way to help them get into the theory as well. Because I imagine, you make this look so easy, but that is one of those things where it's like you make it look so easy because you've put in, you've done the 10,000 hour thing of like playing these voicings and experimenting and doing all that. So
that's for sure.
Yeah.
I noticed someone said, they were like, why can't you go on the record about your favorite voicing? I was just going to say, I flip flop a lot. It's really like, I'll say that's my favorite voicing of the week. We can establish that.
Perfect. That no one's going to hold you to it. Don't worry. The Jazz Council of America will not revoke your membership card or the Neo Soul Council of America if you change your mind later on. Looking down, fave any chord 7911. I'm not quite sure what Kirk Lewis means by that. Is he asking if do you like sevenths, ninths, or 11ths? Is that a fair question to ask you?
I mean, I would say all of them. You can't choose.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Well, listen, I've kept you on here for a while, and I think I'm gonna let you have your day back. And also, I don't know, I assume it's coming through the mic. Somebody upstairs has decided to start installing flooring, which is a nice way of saying that maybe our stream is time to start wrapping up. But am I cutting off anything that we wanted to cover, or are we kind of in a good agenda point that we could leave people with this information? Say, we've given you this. Go forth and make some lo-fi yumminess.
Totally. That's what I was gonna say. I feel like this is a manageable amount. The last thing that I was gonna add, which we could really keep super abstract and short, would be, we've been playing in the G major center.
Yeah.
This whole progression could be done in sort of a minor context.
Oh, let's you want to talk about that? Let's talk about that. That's cool.
Yeah, if we got like a G minor 7, then if we keep the minor third, which is sort of defining this key center, my E minor 7 is actually going to become an E minor 7 flat 5. But you don't really have to think about that if you just remember, hold on to the B flat. And then I'm going to have an A minor 7 flat 5. That's a choice. You could do a natural 5, but and then a D7 flat 9. So that's all to say, I think taking these exercises from a minor key center would be fun too. And then looking ahead, you can kind of mix and match between the two, right? So if we've got, we're starting off in sort of major world, but then I throw to a minor kind of vibe, bring it back to major. So basically working with the 1-6-2-5 as both a major center progression and a minor center progression, but then mixing those two worlds together to create something that's even more wild.
Is it possible to play that with the backing to kind of hear just...
Yeah, totally.
Does that work over top of what you have, the bass line?
Yeah, that was one of the intentions here. So here's just a kind of plainish minor version. I'm gonna go major. Still in major here. We can flip back to minor.
Wow.
Major, you can just really go back and forth.
God, I feel like this is where if you've got a good R&B singer that's really like locking in with where you're going, I feel like those two combinations, them following and you following them, can go some seriously cool places.
Totally. So going between those two worlds can be really fun as well.
Wow, that is really cool. That sounds so good. Addy Satrio says, "No, I just arrived." Addy, don't worry. This is the beauty
of. Play this back.
Yeah, you got stream replay. Don't worry. There's
internet's forever.
You've got a whole episode to check out here. But Night Shift says, I missed some good shit apparently. You did. You'll get into this too because I know that's Koichi. He's a friend of ours and he's got awesome. He's a chord guy. He's a keys player and stuff. I am Drabba says, why do I suddenly feel the urge to study? Right? I am the same way. I suddenly, like, you know, Bryn, I am I usually say I'm a proud jazz school dropout, but now I feel shame that I didn't stick with it more.
I didn't go to music school. I did have, you know, great teachers and did a lot of music studying, but I'm definitely a lifelong learner. So it's never too late. No shame.
Yeah.
Get in, get out whenever you're feeling inspired.
Right. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Brian Mack says life is the study of all studies. That is true. So we're all still learning and always going on. Now, I'm going to put in a request here for you. Can I put you on the spot? Although I don't feel like I'm in any way putting you on the spot because you're so damn good at this. Could you maybe, as we head out of our stream today, could you provide our outro music in the form of that loop and then kind of vibing out on it?
Definitely. Yeah. How will I know when to stop?
You'll just keep going until we're off the stream and you'll see me.
Okay, perfect.
I'll talk to you off the stream.
Thank you guys all for hanging out. Find me on social media and hit me up with your chord questions or any other related harmonic producer concerns.
So yeah, what is the, I mean, will they find you just through, if they Google Bryn Bliska, or are you at Bryn Bliska, or?
I am probably both of those things. I am at Bryn Bliska on, you know, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, but also if you Google my name, hopefully something relevant comes up. You could find me there as well.
Perfect. Well, listen, I am so thrilled that we could do this. I came to know you through your Friction video that you did, and instantly I was like, ooh, like she's clever, and now I realize just how deep that cleverness goes, and my gosh,
thank you.
Super fun having you on, and hopefully we can have you on again. I mean, We've been doing this stream now for about 6 months, and at some point we're going to start having repeat guests on because people have really enjoyed them. And I think there's so much more that we can do and talk about.
Totally.
So hopefully you can do that with us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you, Reason, for welcoming me into the family as a somewhat outsider. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Yeah.
Go.
Awesome. All right, Brent, give us some vibe, and I'll say goodbye to people here. Love it. Normally I would switch just to my own camera, but I think, guys, it's fun to watch her doing her thing there. So listen, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we're going to be back next week. We haven't announced our guest yet. We're still putting the final touches on it. But in between now and then, let's all go make some music. I don't know about you guys. I am inspired to make some of this. And this is not my normal wheelhouse. So I love anything that moves me outside of my routines. And so hopefully you guys are feeling the same. If this is not a style you dabble in, I think it's time to start dabbling. So we will see you next week. Thanks as always to Bryn and all our guests. They do such a fantastic job. Do hit her up on social media. Do check out her Spotify, all those things. Let's go support her and give her the recognition she absolutely deserves. And you guys, I'll see you next week. I'm gonna debut this rack. I'm gonna debut it. It'll probably be off camera, so maybe you won't see it. But I'll show you next week. It's gonna be in place. Finally, after months of planning, I'm so excited. Except I just missed my delivery. But I'll figure that out. All right, guys, have a good week. We'll talk to you next week on the Reason Livestream.